Okay, well, why don't we get ahead and get started here? We got about 18 folks or so, and I think there'll be more that will pop in. So, all right. Just to remind everybody that we are recording this so that we can make it available after the fact, and people will be able to see it from the website, that sort of thing. This is one in a handful of a series of transatlantic collaboration with between CPM in the US and UVA in the UK, where we have weekly sessions. One week we have a CPM session, the next week we have an EVA session, all in the nature of, hey, we're kind of all in this thing together. It's when you think of COVID, we all have a common problem. Well, so program control is similar. We all need to manage programs better. So the sessions go through the CPM sessions go through the end of October. EVA sessions go through the first week of November. I'd like to also let folks know that in November we're going to CPM is going to have a PEP training session. Details to follow here shortly within the next week, and then also in December, we're going to this whole IPM series on the CPM side is going to transition to something we call a championship series. And those will be, more formal workshops and things of that nature. And again, as you hear details, we're planning on some virtual events at least monthly, starting in November through next year. So. Okay, so anyway, today we've got Mr. Dan Lynch. He's retired from Raytheon. He's got over 40 years of experience in IPM, and 38 of which is in managing the earned value management. He was the focal point for missile systems in Tucson, Arizona for Raytheon, and he's got 10 years of international joint collaboration where he got to travel a bunch and meet some foreigners. So, Dan, take it away. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gordon. And for all of you out there that know me, it's nice to be back in the saddle again. It's nice to be able to get in front of a bunch of people and, espouse the truths. For those of you that don't know me, you should probably just be grateful. So that's in your favor. So what this is about is after Gordon convinced me that this is something that we have to do, I decided, okay, fine, why don't you stick to your lane and stick to what you're good at? And I consider myself to be fairly proficient in the analysis end of EVM and IPM. And as I got into this, it suddenly hit me, you better not take on the entire subject of the analysis of the data and the metrics in one 45-minute session with Q&A. So it clearly smacked me right in the face that it was just too much for one session. So I broke it down into two, and you'll see up in the top right hand that this is part one. This is strictly going to talk about and offer you some solutions for analysis at the highest level of the program level, specifically around three things that I hope you'll find a little helpful. Things that we don't normally get in a training class, and I'll cross that bridge in a second. Okay, I'm trying to scroll. Arrow down isn't working, Daryl.
Daryl's not. Try
page down.
Well, try clicking it. Try with your mouse, just shifting, rolling the mouse down or something.
No.
Well, you get a lot of clicks there. Okay,
yeah,
so let me.
Well, I was trying to scroll it. Now I don't have any control at all.
Why don't we do this? Why don't you bring up the pitch locally and share your screen?
All righty, let me go do that. Okay, just be patient, folks. I'm really, really good at what I do. But
Well,
now
you
I got to
got
get back and share the screen first.
so as he's bringing it up, one of the points that I want to make about data analytics is, the earned value management reporting, provides data, and we definitely spend a lot of time getting that data and making sure that the data is as accurate as possible and that kind of thing. But the key is if you don't do anything with the data, if you don't analyze it and then and make come up with actionable things to do, that's an issue. So that's what this is all about. Are you all set there, Dan?
I can't tell. All of a sudden, I got it control back somehow. Um,
Okay, well, it's working. EVM IPM refresher is what's showing right now.
yeah, it's not necessarily what I wanted to show. I don't think that's the page 2 of my screen. Can you see my screen now?
I don't think you're sharing it.
Request control.
Well, don't request control. Go over here to screen share. There's that upward arrow.
Yeah,
Do the upward arrow. It says share content.
cool. So now I can go back to my PowerPoint.
Yeah, and then it'll
I,
actually show which
all right, you
window.
see that now where it says a quick refresher?
Yes.
Cool. All right, now I got it. I'm sorry for that, folks. It's CPM's fault. So what I wanted to do, just for everybody's benefit, is just give you a quick refresher on EVM. I don't know the level of everyone that's participating. However, I am not going to go down to the what I would call the beginner mode. This is the refresher is going to focus on those individuals that are in between a beginner and an intermediate. Okay. So we'll go through that, and then we're going to look at some of the analysis points that we don't look at or we don't know how to look at the program level. So what I'm really trying to say here is we're not going to talk about variance analysis. That's part of part 2. Okay. Part 2, which I don't know when it's going to be, it isn't scheduled yet, but we'll deal with schedule variance, cost variance, variance at completion, okay? And what that all means relative to the big monster, which is the EAC on a program, okay? What we're going to look at today, as I said, is a quick refresher on EVM, and we're going to look at how we track and status and pay attention to MR and UB and baseline integrity. Okay, there's going to be not a lot of slides. I did not put together a lot of slides. I would like to have a significant amount of conversation. You can either wait till the end. You can interrupt me now. I have children, so I'm used to being interrupted. That's not a problem. So, feel free. All right. So with that, let's get started. Gordon, would you keep an eye on the clock for me? So, I mean, if it looks like I'm getting, out in there in the trouble zone,
Yep,
you'll
yes, I will.
let me
And
know.
folks, if you have a question, go ahead and use that raise your hand function, and
Right.
then call on you. So, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll.
Which is a screen that I can't see here at home. Okay. So if you would keep track of those, Gordon, that'd be
I
great.
got it. I got
Thank
it.
Okay, so the refresher starts off with let's remind each other of what our objectives are, right? When we're doing EVM, IPM, which I consider to be just about one and the same. I think Mr. Kranz will argue that EVM is a piece of IPM, and he wouldn't be wrong. He just wouldn't agree with me, that's all, which, is pretty common for Mr. Kranz and I. But be that as it may, the objectives is that you get the work defined right before you start it. You schedule the work, you assign the resources, you establish and assess your MR as well as your risk and opportunity. You measure the plan that you've put together, right? You establish the metrics that you want to use and create and maintain a program log to track this stuff and to keep an eye on it, because you must pay attention to what the metrics say so that you can do trending. Are you getting better? Are you getting worse? What are we doing the last half year of performance on this program? And so you measure that performance, you analyze the variances. And I'll just spend a second here getting on my soapbox a little bit, and especially for those of you that are kind of new at EVM out there, variances are not bad, okay? It is not a sin to have a variance. Besides, I could very successfully argue that if you don't have a cost variance, you're probably going to end up in jail, okay? Because the actual rates that you get on a program never, if ever, match the budgeted rates, particularly for the labor or perhaps in the factory. If you don't have a cost variance, something's very, 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 very goofy. I didn't say schedule. I'm sorry. I didn't say hourly variance. I can see you have the same amount of hours for your performance as well as for your actuals. You can have a zero variance there, but I guarantee you the rates are different. Okay. So don't lose your mind if you have a variances. Variances are not bad. They're pointers. Okay. They're pointers. So the other things that we do and are important, obviously, is the EAC. That is the big enchilada, by the way. At the end of the day, EVM is nice. CPIs are fun to play with, and TCPIs and all that neat stuff, and how you track MR, and how long are you supposed to have your UB sitting in a pot unplanned, all fun stuff. None of it matters. It's all about the EAC because that's real money. Okay. And of course, the last thing is and it's very important, by the way, is that you manage, monitor, and control change. Change happens all the time in our world, right? All the time. And by the way, during the course of my 4 decades in this environment, I never heard the term BCR until I got to Raytheon. Okay. I bet a lot of you don't know that writing a BCR is not a requirement in 748. It is not a requirement to write a BCR. What the requirement is what you see right there. Manage, monitor, and control change. Now, industry, as well as the government, have adopted this little thing called baseline change requests, okay, which seems to be mostly universal. Everybody uses the BCR and the BCR form. But I'm just here to tell you that that's just, an acronym. There's no requirement. The requirement is to manage change. Okay? So that's where we're at there. Now let's see if I can change the page. And if you have questions, like Gordon says. Okay, so why do we do all this stuff? Okay, because we got to know what the impact on the schedule and the cost is of the technical problems that we've discussed. There's a lot of technical stuff that goes on that's going to impact your cost and schedule performance. It's going to impact your baseline. It's going to impact your EAC. Then you get over into the top right where I mentioned, are there going to be enough funds to pay for the total cost of our project? That's where the rubber hits the road. Funds is money. Funds is cash. Okay? Your BCWS, by the way, is not money. You may think it is. It's not. Your BCWP and your BAC, they are not money. They are dollar representations of your scope. Okay? When you talk about the BCWS, that is the dollarized value of your contract. The BCWP is the dollarized value of the work that you've accomplished. And your BAC is the dollarized value of all the work that you have to do. It is not money. ACWP is money. Money you've spent, cash, dollar signs, or euro signs, as the case may be, or the British pound, out of respect for my friend Mr. Wake. Okay? The same thing is also applicable on the EAC, the estimate at complete. That's money. So never confuse those acronyms, by the way, that have a B in them, because that stands for budget. Budget stands for scope. Budget does not stand for money. I once had an argument with somebody, and I was working on a several billion-dollar program, and I told them, I could actually control this EVM if you gave me a budget of $3. And they looked at me like I was drunk, and in spite of the fact of my reputation, I wasn't. And I explained to them that, it doesn't matter where you put the decimal. It's just a dollarized value. I don't care if you make it worth, a control account that's worth 3 cents or 1 cent or, 1/10 of 1 cent. Doesn't really matter. Okay. I guarantee you that your schedule metrics will be point on, spot on. There'll be no difference.
Hey, Dan.
Yes. Who's this?
This is Jen Horner. I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's a bunch of chats. There's a bunch of chat comments that are coming through. I think we're all looking at slide 5. So we're not seeing the slide that you're actually briefing right now.
Okay. What slide are you seeing again? My slides aren't numbered. Oh, you're at the one that has Y earned value?
Yes, correct.
Oh, well, I beg your pardon. I was at a slide in front of that. But I'll stay on this slide now. Is that okay?
Yeah, I just don't think that when you move slides, nothing changed. Like we've been looking at slide 5 the whole time.
Okay, I'll try and be sensitive to that. And when I make a change to the slide, I'll announce it, and I'll rely on you to tell me you're full of shit. It didn't move.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. So I have put myself on slide 5. Is that okay now for everybody? Jen, you can say yes.
The slide didn't advance. We're still on 5, but yes.
Well, yeah, that's the slide I have on my screen where I talk about Y earned value. Okay. And I haven't gotten there, but I'm going to start there now. Okay.
Okay.
So why do we do earned value? Because it emphasizes your disciplined planning, right? Integrates your cost and schedule and your technical performance, okay, which is very critical. You can't ignore the technical performance, because I've been in situations where you finished a task or perhaps a control account, and all of a sudden now you say, well, I've accomplished everything that I had in my baseline. But what you forgot to do was that you have to understand that you got a weight requirement. That's WEIGHT requirement, and you never measured that. Okay, so you think you're done, but you're not. Okay, that's why the technical performance piece is critical. You don't want to miss something like that. You'll pay for it. All right. Earned value has also been a proven management tool. I mean, people have been trying to get rid of it ever since they invented it. Okay. There's the anti-EVM people. EVMS is a 4-letter word, which is why I've been trying to preach a little bit and practice as well in the acronym world of using IPM and steering myself away from using EVMS, so they can't even say it's a 4-letter word anymore. I kind of like IPM. It's time for a change. As some of you will understand, as there's a new 748 that's being worked, and I think that might open some eyes in the fact that we are changing. We're trying to keep up with the future that's upon us. I think it's critically important that you use it for trend analysis, because the other thing that EVM gets accused of, right, is that, oh, it's looking in the rear view mirror. Well, obviously, if you're only thinking that it looks in the rear view mirror, quite frankly, you're doing it wrong. You're not taking full advantage of what EVM metrics and data can provide for you, right? You clearly don't have an understanding of what the TCPI is. You don't have an understanding about what your performance to date means in relationship to your projected performance. So I've had a lot of heated arguments that, don't tell me that EVM is not predictive. It most certainly is predictive. There's a whole lot of data, a whole lot of metrics, whole lot of neat numbers. If you're a numbers guy like me, there's a whole lot of that stuff that lies underneath the surface, right? It's a whole lot of surface data. But there's even more under the surface data. We'll talk about that in a second. And the last thing that I think it's very good for, as to why we use earned value, it is a messenger tool. It provides both industry and government the same information so that they can get together, have an intelligent conversation, and make decisions about what things need to be done in order to get back on track or what have you. Okay, so I'm about to change pages. Okay, Jen?
All right, I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, let's see how it goes. Do you have a blank page with EVM IPM refresher up top?
We are still looking at slide 5.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think when I don't think you actually shared your content. I think we're still looking at the general.
We are. Well, who decided that?
I don't know, these darn computers.
I'm telling you, it's starting to piss me off, but you know. Request control, request control. I requested control. All right. Now.
Well, so
What
I don't think it's
is
request
that?
control. If you
This
go
is,
over, to where your mic and your video thing is, there's an upward arrow.
yeah, I got it.
Then the upward arrow, and then it gives a bunch of windows, and
Yeah.
you pick which window you want to share.
Uh-huh. Um.
We're seeing something different now, Dan.
Well, that may not be a good thing. Shit, who knows?
No, I think you got it.
Yeah, and then
Nope.
oh yeah, no, we got it. Yeah,
Yep.
it's a blank
Okay,
screen.
so did something just come flying into your screen? Why EVM? Why
Yeah.
IP management?
Yeah, and the crowds cheered.
Yeah. Just make sure they're all muted, would you please? Okay. Now, did something just come in like a screen and a graph?
Yes.
All right, so let's talk about this for a second. We do EVM and IPM because for centuries, perhaps for millennia, okay, this is what happened in the world of planning and measuring and figuring out how life is. It measured what you expended versus what you planned to expend, okay? Dollars. Okay, we had planned to spend, I don't know, $35 million, and we actually spent 40. I don't know what the numbers say there. They're a bit too small for me as well. But I actually think the numbers are we planned to spend 35 and we spent 40 or something like that. I'm not really positive what the numbers are. That's unimportant. Okay, what this one box is telling you, right, is that it's measuring what we spent versus what we plan to spend. Fine, that's all well and good. But the analogy I make to that, if I could digress just for a couple of minutes, time is at 8:30. I got to get moving. Is that, you know, you have a teenager at home and you've decided to go away for the weekend. You hand them $500 and you tell them to paint the family room. Okay. And you call every day and you ask them, how much did you spend today? Well, I spent 150 bucks. Oh, that's good because I had you planning to spend 150 bucks. Then they call up on Sunday and they say, how much have you spent? And the teenager says, I've spent 450 bucks. Okay, cool. That was right in the plan. I had it that way. Then he calls up Monday morning because they're going to be driving home all day and says, how much have you spent? And the teenager says, perfectly, I spent 500 bucks. Parents are ecstatic. That's exactly what they had planned. Then they arrive home on Monday night, okay? And what's sitting in the family room is a brand new stereo, okay? Speakers out the yin yang and a brand new Fender guitar. And they're like, what happened? You didn't do, you asked me what I spent and I told you what I spent. You didn't do any earned value. You didn't say, well, what have you done? You simply asked, did you spend the money? And the teenager said, yeah. And he's got a pretty decent Stratocaster to speak for it, right? So somewhere in the 60s, the Air Force, God bless them, invented this thing called earned value management. Actually, back then it was not called earned value management. It was cost schedule control systems criteria, CSC, I believe it was either the late 60s, early 70s. I'll go with late 60s because it's before my time. I was still in high school, grammar school maybe. Anyway, what they invented was we now can measure what was actually done, what was achieved, and measure that against what was expended and what was planned. Okay. And this is a vital thing. This is actually telling the world, are you ahead of schedule? Are you behind? How you doing in terms of what you've done versus what you've spent? This means everything. The green line in that graph, okay, is a beautiful thing. It's the difference between having almost complete knowledge as opposed to the graph on the left, which gives you zero knowledge. You don't know anything from that graph on the left. Okay, I'm going to get moving because according to my clock, it's like 8:32, Gordon, or 11:32.
It should be 8:29. You
Really?
just gained
Okay,
3 minutes.
so that's a little fast. All right, I got a 3-minute lag. That's cool. Okay, so we're going to wrap up the refresher, I believe, on this point. There are 5 essential points that drive all peripheral data or metrics. Okay. You'll see numbers that come out from all over the place in the world, all right, for EVM, and they'll say this is data, this is metrics, this is all the cool stuff, okay? Well, let me tell you, all of that data, all of it is derived from the following 5 things. And it's not even, by the way, it's not even math. I know you people out there have heard me say before, if you've heard me speak before, this is not math, this is arithmetic. Okay, and hardly calculus or anything like that. It's basically arithmetic. So the first piece that you have to have in EVM to drive all decision making is you got to have your ACWP. Okay, you got to have what you spent. You do not include your open commitments. Okay, nothing wrong with having them. You just don't put them into your ACWP. Okay, the next thing you got to have is your budgeted cost of work schedule, your BCWS. You got to have a baseline. You got to have a plan. Okay, you must have that, and you must have it dollarized, because at the end of the day, everything has to be dollarized. You got to have the budgeted cost of work performed. Okay, the work that's been done, the earned value, BCWP. Okay, there's 2 more pieces we need. I got to know what the total budget is, said another way, I got to know what my total scope is. Okay, and I have to know what that is. What's my dollarized representation of my total scope? All right. So in other words, once I get all of the work accomplished, it should be the same number as to all the work I was budgeted to do. Right. When the work is done, there is no work remaining. All right. And then finally, the last piece is your EAC, your estimate at completion. That's your pure dollars. You've got to have that piece of information, and you got to have all 5 of these on a regular basis. Now, doesn't mean you have to have it on a weekly basis. Good God, please, oh no. Talk about overkill, right? You get paralysis by analysis. I've heard that term. Having all of this information at every level of your WBS on a weekly basis and making that like sort of mandatory. I'll be frank here. You need your head examined, okay? Because you cannot deal with all of that information as a human being, okay? Now we have a lot of systems out there that drive all the peripheral data that comes from these 5. Think about these 5 pieces of data, okay? Just think about them for a second. You can't get a TCPI, right, without getting the BCWR. So what is the BCWR? Budgeted cost of work remaining, right? What is that? That is all the budget or all the scope that you have to do, the BAC, minus all the work that you have done, that's your BCWP, and what one minus the other leaves you with all the work you haven't done yet. That's your BCWR, right? Okay, cool. When you do an ETC, you're doing an ETC against that BCWR. And guess what that gives you? The TCPI. Okay, your CPI comes from all this information, your SPI, your TCPI, your variance, everything is drawn from this. We agreed that, that you can have an EVM system that if it provides reliable, timely pieces of data like these 5, okay, at every level of the WBS where it's needed, that you've got a system. You've got a very valid system, okay? Sometimes we overcomplicate it that, well, we need to have this and that, at that low level and all this other stuff. Folks, the stuff that's on the screen is what you need for an EVMS. You need to get this on a regular basis. It could be monthly, it could be weekly, it could be quarterly, okay? And you need it at appropriate levels of the WBS. These days, if you have the DFARS clause, you're going to have all of this at the control account level, which most of you probably have anyway, okay? That's the new minimum in the IPM DAR. You got to report at the control account level, okay? So that's it for the refresher piece. Now I want to get into how we measure and do analysis on some pieces within EVM that we generally don't spend a lot of time looking at or even understand. If you're a newbie, believe me, I feel for you. Nobody ever taught me how to measure and analyze management reserve and undistributed budget or baseline integrity until I was well into my first strands of gray hair. I didn't get this information early on. So anyway.
Hey, Dan.
Yes, sir.
It's Eric Kimsey. I just have a quick question because the difference between LRE and EAC, I noticed that companies, they interchange those. What is the difference?
Nothing. With the exception of, I guess maybe twice a year, your EAC is the one that goes to the New York Stock Exchange. Monthly, you hand an LRE, which is the same as an EAC, over to the government. I do know that there's companies that do make a distinction, okay, between an LRE and an EAC. Frankly, at the end of the day, there's no damn difference. There is no difference. It is the cost estimated for all of the work.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. I'm sure that'll get me in Dutch with the old Raytheon folks. Somehow, when I went to Raytheon, all of a sudden LRE and EAC were different things. And I worked there for 13 years and I still didn't figure it out. Anyway, let's move on. I'm not here to trash anyone. Okay, so let's talk about MR for a while. Where does it come from? Well, it doesn't magically appear. Now, before I hit the next slide for something to fly up into your face, I actually worked on a contract where MR was literally built into the contract value. That was pretty cool. I only had one contract in my whole life like that. It was actually really neat. So it can come from your customer up front, built into the contract value. You shake hands or you arm wrestle at the table, I guess is a proper term, and you come up with a value within the program structure that's recognized MR for the work. But generally speaking, it comes from management challenge. You know, when you bust your tail coming up with the estimate for the work and you figure out that you need 750K and you've got the detail and you're real confident, and then, oh my goodness, you get the award and you didn't get the 750K, you got something like 675 because they took a 10% management challenge. Don't feel personally attacked when that happens. There isn't a control account manager in the world who hasn't felt the love from a program manager challenging him or her, okay? You can call, I mean, it's a nice term. It's a management challenge. Frankly, kids, it's a 10% scalping that everybody gets. Generally speaking, they'll go after 10% of all labor, okay, including build labor. If you've got a real good case and quotes from vendors, they might leave your material alone, okay, prior to taking the 10% sweep at the top. But I am a proponent. You need to have MR. If you don't have MR, you are doomed because change is coming, okay? Change is coming. You're going to have an argument with your counterpart across the table who is, you know, like a member of the IPT, but they're from the government, and they will argue to the death that the scope that they want to do that isn't in your baseline should have been. In other words, the scope resides in the contract. You just didn't put it in your control account. Therefore, I'm not giving you squats for budget. You already have the budget. You're going to have to suck it out of MR to get it into the baseline. Any questions there? You see my point? Okay. Now, I also put in there that you can get an increase, by the way, to your MR by having reductions to the scope. Okay, if you're looking at the screen, you can see that there. You can get legitimate changes in scope. One of the ways that I often describe that is you have an initial plan where you're going to do 5 tests. And as you're going along, and after the first, the second, the third, you're really successful. And after the 4th one, you sit back and you say, oh, cool. I really am done. I've convinced my customer there's no need to do any more testing. Okay, so you kill that control account. You stop the scope right there. You take the earned value for 4 tests. You take the budgeted value of the 5th test. You throw it into MR. No, you don't throw it into UB because that scope no longer exists, right? So throw it into MR. That's how you can increase MR value. Okay, let's move along. What is it for? This is pretty basic stuff, but it's always good to, remind people. It's not for overruns, just in case anybody needs that, laser tick on their back. No, 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 no. Please do not use it for overruns. I can't think of anything you can do worse in EVM than make that error. I hope that's a takeaway from today that you really might stick with your head. So what is it for then? Okay, it's for the unknown. Okay, it's for that conversation that I just had previously about the fact that the government now, on the other hand, thinks you need to do a 5th test, right? But you didn't budget it because the statement of work didn't say do 5 tests. It just said test it, right? So you're a genius. You figured out you can do it in 5. Government's not happy. They want a 5th test, okay? That is by definition still within the scope of work of the contract. Okay, you still got to do it. The customer says you got to do it. You got to do it. Okay, where are you going to get the budget from? Dun, 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 dun. It's coming from MR. Okay, because the way the statement of work was written says you must test. Didn't say 5, didn't say 4. You determined it was 4. Government disagreed. You caved in. You're going to do a 5th test. It's got to come from somewhere in the budget and put it in the baseline. Okay, clear? And by the way, I could go on with instances and examples of, the arm wrestle that you're going to have with your customer at times over whether it's new scope or whether it's existing scope that you didn't plan. Okay. Now, I've also worked on programs where they've decided that they're going to use MR for rate adjustments. And one of the things I caution folks with this is that, when rates go down, okay, this is a wonderful little gift, right, that you get, and you can put that delta into your management reserve, okay? But I caution folks that, you got to play fair. Rates go down, fine, you can fund your MR allotment. But when rates go up, you better do the same and feed the baseline with MR budget for when the rates increase. You must be consistent. You got to play fair. Okay? You can't mess with MR. Sorry.
So this is Gordon. That raises a question for me to talk about. So get the, if you're doing a task, you end up completing it early and it truly is complete, capturing the remaining budget and sticking it in MR, this kind of thing. What comes to mind is, at what point do you stop worrying about whether you have a 1-1 metric and you accept the variance and learn from it?
You always accept the variance. Your example that you said there where you finished early, finishing early did not change the scope. You still completed all the scope. So therefore you wouldn't make any movement at all. You would live with the underrun. Okay. And there comes a time when you live with all the underruns and all the overruns. It's frankly that simple. You're not to use the MR for either instance. Does that make sense to you, Gordon?
It does. Thank you.
Cool beans. Good question.
Hey, Dan.
Yes, sir. Who's this?
This is Eric Kimsey again. For the rate adjustments,
you're allowed 2 questions, Eric. Okay.
I know. Per slide, right?
Yeah.
Rate adjustments, I thought were something that we handled in a more of an EAC MR. Don't we usually work with 2 MRs? Like we have the budgeted MR and we have the EAC MR, and rates kind of fall in the EAC MR.
Here's the deal with that. MR EAC does not exist in EVM. You're coming at it from a financial planning aspect, okay? That's a different animal altogether. I know the package that they put together at Raytheon, and MR for EAC is a totally different animal than MR for your BAC, if you're following along, okay? You use rates all the time, okay, in your EAC column, always. You're always using rates, updated rates in the EAC column, always, almost monthly if you're that dynamic. The issue is if you get if you wish to use that same new rate in the budgeted column, you can, but you got to be consistent. The bottom line is, if I can explain this best, Eric and anybody that's on the phone from Raytheon will get this, okay? I'm not sure how the other companies run. I haven't been out on the street in a while, but MREAC does not exist in EVM. Is that understood? MREAC does not exist. If you ever to look at a CPR or an IPMR or Format 1, you cannot fill out that box. It's grayed out.
I see.
MREAC does not exist in an EVM environment. Okay, MREAC in an FP&A environment certainly does exist, and it exists on a monthly basis. And that's for the finance folks to deal with. They will also deal with the program folks if it really is a major issue.
Thank you.
All right, we good on that? All right. Time's moving along. I got to get rolling here. It's about quarter up, huh, Gordon? Okay. Yes. How do I know I have enough MR? That is the $20,000 question. What's the best way to measure if you have enough MR? At the beginning of a program, right? You're always shooting for 10%. You want 10%. Got to have 10%. As you go along in time, you're going to consume some of that MR. In fact, it's not likely that you'll consume some of that MR. I guarantee it. You're going to burn up that MR for any one of a number of reasons, okay? And believe me, control account managers get creative as hell. They'll figure out a way to get their hands on that MR, because you took their 10% at the beginning anyway. So they want to get some of it back. So here's the deal. I learned this a little while back. I saw some programs, and not to say that they were dumb or anything. They were, just doing their job. I didn't know any better either. But every month they were dividing their MR by their total budget, right? And at the beginning of the program, they got 10%. Good for you. On, a $3 billion program, that's $3 million of MR, or 30 million. I don't know how the math works. I'm an EVM guy. I can't do math. I can do arithmetic, but I can't do math. So they kept taking that 30 million and dividing it into whatever they had left of MR. And obviously the percentage of MR that you had for the balance of work was shrinking. So you get to a point on the program, and this is a true story. These people were down to like 0.7% of MR left on the program, and they had a lot of scope to go, right? So that to me seems kind of silly. You got a lot of scope, but your MR, looks really small now because of that that arithmetic calculation of taking your MR and dividing it by the BAC for the whole program. Well, guess what? That's not what you should be doing. Here is the way to measure if your, I mean, at least to get an indication if your MR is sufficient. You got to divide your MR by the BCWR, the work that isn't done. Why would you include all the work that is done in the calculation? Clearly, you'll never need MR for that. You're done. So why would you use that in the calculation? This was a real eye-opener for me maybe 15, 20 years ago. And I had everybody at that company convinced, okay? And they saw the beauty of it. So if you can keep 7 to 10% of MR throughout the life of the program by doing the calculation of MR divided by BCWR, that's going to give you the more comfortable feeling. That's the number you want to hand to the program manager and say, here's, I'm a genius, boss. I just did this calculation. You got 8.5% MR. You are in good shape. Relax. You got plenty of dollars left for the scope. Okie dokie. Cool. Now the stuff on UB is fairly simple and easy. Okay. Where does it come from? It is the contractual effort that is not time phased for any one of a number of thousands of reasons. Okay. It is sitting in UB. It is scope. Got that? It is scope. It's not at all like MR. It's undistributed for any one of a number of reasons. My best example of one is I was on a program and I had $5 million of UB that was for proposal effort at the end of the program. At the end of the program, we're going to want you to do a proposal for LRIP. And here's $5 million, put it in UB, touch it, I'll kill you, right? So that immediately was one of the first drivers I had that the rule of getting UB distributed in 60 days was frankly a crock, because the customer literally looked me in the face and said, if you distribute it, okay, I'm coming after you. I'll cut it out of the contract and then you'll have to pull it out. Okay. So don't let anybody tell you. There are reasons why you will have something in UB for a significant amount of time, far beyond what 748 might recommend. Okay. What is UB for? It's to maintain a relationship with the scope you know you got to do and the budget for that. Okay. You should never let them separate. Keep them together. Always include it in your Format 5 or your variance narrative or whatever you're submitting these days, right? Your executive summary if you're doing an IPM DAR, right? Always put something in there that shows what the budget is for your UB and what is the scope for the associated dollars. It'll only help you when the time comes when somebody says, we want you to plan that out now. You don't have to go on a big panic and search. Oh my God, what the hell is the budget for that stuff? I lost it. No. Stick it monthly in your executive summary and you'll never have an issue. Okay?
10 minutes.
Can UB have a variance? It most certainly can. Here's why. Cost variance only, but you know that your rates have changed. Your rates are no longer applicable for that undistributed budget work. You got, I'll pick a number, $500,000 of UB for X amount of scope. You now know that that scope is not going to be done in 2021. It's going to be done in 2023, and 2023 rates are out. Of course, they're estimated and they'll change again, but you've got to use those rates in your UB EAC. So don't let anybody tell you can't have a variance on UB. You can. You follow? Good. All right. How do I know it's sufficient? What's the best way to measure the UB? You know it's sufficient because it's related to the scope. Okay? You're as confident in that as you are as confident in anything at the control account level. Okay? That's the way it works. Okay? Now, baseline integrity. I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can. So in the baseline integrity, you have to pay attention to and look for all the unaccounted for changes. Okay. How do you know a change is unaccounted for? Well, it takes a little bit of work, and it was quite easy back in the day because you got a Format 3 that you could look at, and you would look at it either manually or you'd figure out an automated way to check the PMB from the previous reporting period to the PMB that's currently the current reporting period. In other words, I think it's about row 6 or something in the format. But if something from one month to the other has changed, okay, I'm not saying it can't change, but if it changes on that line, that means that somebody changed something without formal documentation, because baselines just don't change by, you know, the blowing of the wind in the air. Okay, there has to be a documented record of the change. And the format 3 that you submitted last month sure as hell better be the baseline that you're reporting at the top of format 3. You know, kids, for those of you that are well versed, the top of format 3, it better well state what you had on the bottom of format 3 last month. Okay, you compare those two, sort of like this, right? It's just last month it slides up here like this. You compare those two numbers. If they don't match, something's going on. Clear and simple. Somebody changed something without documentation. I could show it to you better if I had a little more time to put the graph together, but it doesn't. I didn't have the time. Okay, if it doesn't match dollar for dollar, there is an unaccounted for change to the baseline, which is not good for any interested party. It's not good for industry. It's not good for your customer. It's not good for DCMA. It's not good for anything. Please, please keep your baseline with its integrity. And I can simply say that is that do not make any changes that, you know, are not accounted for. Don't do it. Okay. And by the way, while we're talking about format 3, if you're still getting them, it can also be used to check your UB movements, right? If you can think of a format 3 and how it looks out there, column, I don't know, maybe 11 or 12 is UB. All right, and there's a number there from last month. Any changes to that number should be underneath of it within the gray section, which is no longer gray, right? We got to put numbers in there so that it ties out to your new undistributed budget number at the bottom of what we used to call format 3.
5 minutes.
I know that was rather quick at the end, but now we're there, and it looks like we got what, about 5 minutes? I'm sorry.
That's all right. Any questions
that I could answer in 5 minutes?
Any discussion? Yeah, Dan, that was, you know, excellent, you know, presentation, you know, particularly how it, you know, measuring, you know, your metrics and that sort of stuff relate to specific things, you know, MR, UB, that sort of thing. You know, fantastic. I really appreciate you pulling it together and sharing your knowledge. A good opportunity, guys, to ask an expert in the field, you know, a question or two here. So, okay, let's see. Chelsea, did you have your hand up?
Hi, yes, I was a little confused. I missed with the UB having a cost variance. I was just not clear on that, because the variance would be between budget cost of work performed versus actual cost of work performed. So if you could just clarify that for me.
Sure. I used the wrong term, Chelsea, and I apologize. It is not a cost variance. I don't know. It got away with me. I'm talking variance of completion. I beg your pardon.
Oh, okay.
I'll fix the slide. Very good catch, by the way. Very good catch. You will not have a cost variance because you'll never have any ACWP or BCWP for undistributed. Great catch. Thank you. I feel so ashamed.
Any other questions? We're running up against the hour here. Well, thank you all for participating. Again, this is another fantastic session. We've got UVA has a session next week. I'll let Steve tell you a little bit about it in a second. And 2 weeks from now, we're going to talk a little bit more about technical metrics in themselves, system engineering metrics, TPMs, that sort of thing, and how they relate to progress that you want to take in earned values. So the interesting thing is I actually had a chance to interact with some system engineers from Turkey and from Australia to, to help with the conversation. So I look forward to that. That'll be September 30th. Steve Wake, are you still on to tell us a little bit about next week?
Yeah, I've just woken up.
Thank
That was a great talk, Dan.
Well, thank you, sir.
I look forward to the next session as well. I still, I don't know about you, but I still think it's worth persevering with these ideas, whether they're called IPM or EVM. I'm certainly not going to give up, even if I'm not quite retired yet either. And on that note, next week, yeah, on that note, next week, it's a proper conversation club meeting next week. My conversation club numbers some of the senior project and program directors running major projects in the UK. They were part of an assist that was used in order to inform the production of a new British standard. And this new British standard is called BS, unfortunately, 202001. And it's about project controls. And project controls this standard is significant. It's going to be a specification standard, which means that it's not a guide. You have to do it. It's full of should and shall statements. And 3 of my colleagues will be bringing the club up to date on where we are with this particular standard, which is scheduled for publication at the end of the year, the beginning of next year. Those 3 people are Alistair Forbes, who's head of projects and programs for Network Rail, Breda Ryan, who's head of projects and programs for Jacobs, and Ian Minns, who's head of projects and programs for Arcadis. And they are all very senior. They sit on the same panel as I do for the British Standards Institution. The key difference with controls as it's coming over the hill now is that controls will also be being encouraged to monitor the arrival of benefits into the occasion. So benefits from a good idea, cradle to grave monitoring, right the way through from inception to through the projects and programs into use, and maybe even 5, 10, 15 years into the future as the benefits are delivered. So it's a key moment for project controls in the UK.
Sounds fantastic. And we'll be sending out links on that tomorrow, and we'll be sending out links for the session in a couple weeks, a week from now. So again, thank you for participating, and look forward to the next set of discussions.
Thanks, Gordon.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great week, and I look forward to doing part 2 for you at some point in the near term. Peace.